Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Gloria and thank you so much for clicking on today's video. Today we'll be talking about how I get my Hoyas specifically to bloom and put out some beautiful flowers. And these are just kind of my tips and tricks as to what has worked for me in the past. I've had a lot of my Hoyas bloom in the past, and some are currently about to blossom. So I'm really excited to share some of these tips with you guys, and hopefully they help you get your Hoyas to bloom as well. If you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on any of my new videos. And yeah, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so just to get started, if you've been following me on my plant journey, I've been collecting plants for probably like 4 years now. I took a little bit of a break in between and my plant collection has dwindled a little bit, but I still have a lot of my Hoyas. So my Hoyas have been very resilient, number one. And number two, they still continue to bloom for me. So I wanted to see if I could shed some light and provide some of these tips with you guys so that hopefully your Hoyas will bloom for you as well. So what I found has worked really well for me in the past is to have really good growing conditions. I know that sounds so simple, but for example, I would want my Hoyas to be in a warm place. So it's winter here where I am in Canada right now. So it's fairly cold, even with heat in the house. If your plants are very close to a windowsill, there could be like very cool draft coming from the window. So I find my Hoyas do better pulled away from the window, like a little bit further away, or even on a shelf. So I have my Hoya Mathilde hanging in front of a window, but I do try to, up the heat in my house and keep it away from directly being under or above a vent so that, like hot air doesn't just like constantly blast on it. So to have the conditions warm, but not have a lot of air flowing directly at it. I have it shifted slightly away from the vent and pulled back from the window. And as you can see, I want to show you, my Hoya Mathilde is growing a peduncle. So it already has a peduncle here, and the flowers look like they're going to open up fairly soon. I mean, this one is not particularly even, so not the entire peduncle was opening up in flowers, but there's still quite a few. And this Hoya is so easy to bloom. I mean, I've chopped this up into multiple plants over the years, and this is the main one, and it still always grows, shoots out new leaves. It doesn't really cause me too many problems. It had a bit of a mealybug infestation for a period of time, but I believe it's for the most part gone. So it's just living its best life and hopefully will be flowering soon. I'll put up a picture of how the blooms usually look. I've had it bloom so many times. They don't spark as much excitement in me wanting to capture these moments anymore just because it happens so frequently. The Hoya Mathilde, very easy bloomer. If there's one plant, actually no. The second plant that I would recommend if you want a Hoya to bloom, my number one top plant that always blooms, and when it does, it is fully covered in flowers, and it is my Hoya nummularioides. So I'll put up a picture here of how it used to look like. Currently it's not in bloom right now, but it tends to very frequently bloom. I just didn't really catch it in the right moment. And since I've moved it to another spot, it's like not as happy. But in order to make it really, really happy, I found was really important to keep by a very moist and high humidity environment. I used to have it right beside my humidifier and it would be running 24/7. So, just on like a low mode, you don't have to like blast it with the humidifier, but especially in the winter when the air is really dry, it does tend to bloom a lot more slowly. So when I keep the humidity up, it does make it bloom a lot better and just way more frequent. Since I've moved it from the ideal prime humidifier spot, it has bloomed a lot less. So I'm thinking I kind of want to bring it back there. The only thing is the humidifier is in my room, and when this Hoya blooms, it's so fragrant. It's just to the point where it's almost nauseating. It's like just so strong. It smells like very intense perfume, and it just gives me a headache in such a small kind of enclosed environment like my bedroom. So I've since moved it downstairs to the living room so that it's more in an open space so that when it does bloom, it doesn't like suffocate anybody. So I would definitely say having a humidifier on 24/7 is really helpful in having your Hoyas bloom. So that's my tip number 2. The only time, I don't have my humidifier on is when it runs out of water and I have to refill it. So if it happens in the middle of the night when I'm sleeping, obviously I will do it in the following morning. But if I do notice whenever my humidifier goes down, I do refill it with water so that the mist can just come back out and make my plants very happy. Tip number 3 is to always keep your Hoyas in very, very, very small pots. So you'll find that some of my Hoyas look very top heavy, as you guys have seen, or they just look like they're in pots that seem way too small for the amount of leaves that is growing on the plant or flowers. It's just that Hoyas are so much happier when they are root bound. So an example here is this Hoya is actually in soil, which I don't have many Hoyas left in soil. This one is in soil and it is the Hoya Morellii. As you can see, it's very, very top heavy and there's just so many leaves, but the tiny little pot down here is probably like a 3-inch pot with very little soil. If I were to, rub off all the soil, you would see that it has so many roots. And the reason that this Hoya is so happy is because it's in such a small pot and that it's root bound. It doesn't need a lot of space in its soil and it just will thrive and flower for you if it's just in a small pot. So that's why with a lot of new Hoya cuttings or small plants, it takes a while for them to mature, grow a really extensive root system before it can flower for you. So in the rare cases, maybe it'll flower for you when it's like a tiny little plant, but the more leaves it grows, the more mature it becomes, it definitely will flower for you. As you can see, I have a peduncle right over here, and then I have another one hidden down here. A little hard to see. 2 peduncles here that are growing. This one, some sap is coming out, so that's another thing to keep note of. A lot of Hoya flowers do release these sticky substances out of its peduncles and flowers when it's blooming, and it does cause quite a bit of a mess. It's a small price to pay for such beautiful flowers. This one, I can't remember how the flowers look for this. I have no documentation. I usually have to go scroll through my photo library to see how these flowers look, but I'll put up a picture of how Hoya Morellii flowers look. They're very pretty. I don't remember being too annoyed with these flowers, so I don't think they're as fragrant as the Hoya Numelarioides. The Mathilde has a slight fragrance, but it's also not like overwhelming in any capacity. So yeah, that's tip number 3. And tip number 4 is to keep your Hoyas away from pests. So obviously, if you have a plant next to the Hoya infested with like thrips or spider mites or mealybugs, the chances of it affecting the Hoya is probably fairly high, especially if it's in a very small environment. The leaves are touching between the 2 plants. And if your plant were to, get some type of pest, it would definitely be under a lot more stress than it needs to be. So it would be harder for it to kind of push out flowers and bloom for you. So, if you have a known plant that is infested with a pest, try to move it away, isolate it, do its thing, treat it in a different area, and then bring it back to your collection. For the most part, I usually only get mealybugs, and mealybugs don't cause too much destruction, at least on the leaves. If you get root mealies, those are really, really hard to treat. I find I have a lot of plants that still flower despite it having mealybugs. A prime example is probably my Hoya crassipetiolata. That Hoya always blooms and always has mealies. It's just so hard to clean all the little vines and leaves, and because the plant is just so big, there's so many spots for the mealies to kind of hide in the little cracks and crevices. So there's only so much I can do. But ideally, you do want to keep your plants away from pests, and therefore it will flower for you. These are my main tips in terms of how I get my Hoyas to flower. For the most part, I'm just very, very hands off with my Hoyas, and I find they're happiest that way. So don't change their pots, don't change their soil, Don't change their substrate, whether it's leca, soil, pond, doesn't matter. I just leave them in their growing substrate and container. Don't touch it. I keep a humidifier close, right in direct light, and just let it do its thing. If you have a Hoya that is about to flower or just flowered, leave a comment down below. I would love to know, and share your experience with how easy or difficult it was for you to get your Hoyas to bloom. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to subscribe if you did, and I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye for now.